But it's very clear to me when listening to Andrew Tate, it's clear that he is constantly searching, seeking out his father's love, trying to prove his father's love. And his father was not present in his life around from 13 years old on, which is when he moved with his mother to England. And so there's this constant longing for the father's approval that is ever present in, it's like the underbelly of what Andrew Tate is.
So you made a great informative video on Andrew Tate on your YouTube channel, and I actually wanted to read a quote from that video.
Sure.
So you said Andrew Tate is like a villain whose pain from childhood has not been healed, but has been corrupted into a deep hunger for power, which sounds like Thanos.
Classic.
So how do you and we were talking about this a little bit before the episode too, but how have you viewed Tate's rise? I'm calling him Tate, like we're about to have a phone conversation now. What's up? What's up, dude? We're talking about you. How do you view Tate's rise to dominance in the not only in the manosphere, but also just complete social media saturation? How have you viewed that, and what are your thoughts on at least what he's sharing online, his whole rise to dominance?
So I first want to start by saying that, I was introduced to the Andrew Tate phenomenon through a friend who's not super into him, but into him. And it sort of came out of left field. I didn't expect it. I had heard about Andrew Tate in passing, but I didn't actually engage with any of his content until this friend told me about him. And, whenever someone, especially personal in my life, is drawn to someone or something that is controversial, I try to pay attention. And that, combined with the fact that Andrew Tate is super popular, also compels me to pay attention. I also really believe in man. And I think it's important to say that at this juncture in the human experience. I think that we live in a culture that certainly has denigrated men how long is a while? I don't know, but for
a few weeks.
Yeah.
No.
for some time. And I didn't necessarily, I wasn't really exposed to that because that's just not the circles that I run in. I don't generally hang around people who are mean to men or women, as a group. But the rise of Andrew Tate made me realize that there are deep wounds, I think, that a lot of men have. And certainly, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Richard Reeves, who's written a lot. So Richard Reeves is, I don't know is he a sociologist or one of those ologists who studies things, but he's shown how men are really struggling in terms of level of education and experiences of depression and prone to suicidal attempts, far more successful than women at committing suicide. And all these things are very much pervasive among men of a certain age who are struggling with that existential sense of self-worth. And I think Andrew Tate has a response, and his response is, in my humble opinion, not the most compelling response or not the most sustainable response from a healthy perspective, but it is nonetheless a compelling one. So I understand Andrew Tate, or the rise of Andrew Tate, within that frame. I also understand the rise of Andrew Tate, as you asked, about social media and the apparatus of social media, the way that the algorithms work. The purpose of a social media company is to get you to pay attention as long as possible.
Yeah.
And one of the things that enables or compels us to pay attention as human beings is outrage and is anger and is, bravado, and
Yeah.
we pay attention to that. We're wired as human beings to pay attention to that. And so you take someone like Andrew Tate, who definitely has, as far as I can tell, definitely has parental baggage, definitely has some ancestral trauma going on there.
Yeah.
And you combine it with his machismo and bravado and anger at women and outrage at women, and you have the phenomenon of Andrew Tate.
Can you tell the story of the lights incident with his dad? Because you mentioned it in the video, but I feel like that's like sort of a good stroke to paint part of what Tate is portraying today.
Yeah, so Andrew Tate tells the story about how when he was 5 years old, he was at his friend's house, and his friend told his mom that he was afraid of the dark, and so he asks his mom for a nightlight, and Andrew Tate goes, "What's that?" And his friend says, "It's a nightlight. I get it every time I'm afraid of the dark." And Andrew, as a 5-year-old, says, "Oh, that's interesting."
I think he had the same voice when he was "What's that? What's that, Dad?"
Yeah, exactly.
"Bring me my meal and bring the light."
Exactly. Same voice. And then so the next day, Andrew asks his father for a nightlight. And his father's playing chess. His father was a chess master, or very good at chess, rather, I should say. And his father's sort of ignoring him. And he keeps pestering his father. And he says, "I'm afraid of the dark." And so his father's brilliant response to this 5-year-old child who's afraid of the dark is to lock him up in a room, and a completely dark room, and tell him, "Oh, you're afraid of the dark? I'm sure you'll figure it out by being afraid of the dark for the next, 6 or 7 hours." And so
just very logical parenting.
Yeah. So Andrew Tate's father essentially throws him into solitary confinement and tells him, "Figure it out." And as Tate tells the story, he cries the whole time. He's afraid. He's terrified. But then he comes out and he's not afraid of the dark. Now, from a psychological perspective, a 5-year-old, like the way that our brains are at five years old, we only have certain coping mechanisms that are automatically wired in us to deal with situations like that. And one of those coping mechanisms that we have is disassociation. And so we can, our capacity to rationalize in retrospect is incredibly impressive. But the way that a 5-year-old who looks up to his father as this superhero, right? The way that a 5-year-old processes that, and can only process that, is through a coping mechanism of numbing. And so, Andrew Tate tells the story about, in a way that sort of like celebrates his father and really glorifies his father. But it's very clear to me when listening to Andrew Tate, it's clear that he is constantly seeking out his father's love. He's trying to prove his father's love, and his father was not present in his life around from 13 years old on, which is when he moved with his mother to England. And so there's this constant like longing for the father's approval that is ever present in. It's like the underbelly of what Andrew Tate is.
It makes sense because he says "I'm your daddy" a lot, so
right,
it's like
that's weird, guys.
He's
weird.
And by a lot, I mean I think I've seen like 2 clips of him like talking shit to a guy, being like "I'm your father" or something like that. But
not a coincidence.
Yeah, no, like it's interesting. Like I had a different introduction to Tate. It was actually through the world of stand-up comedy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because one of my favorite podcasts is called Your Mom's House.
Okay.
Which is funny because it's like we were just talking about daddy, and the fans of this podcast are called the mommies, like Your Mom's House.
Nice.
And it's two comedians, husband and wife, Tom Segura and Christina P. And they had Andrew Tate on their podcast.
No way. What was that like?
So this was before I knew who Tate was, or I knew who he was in a very general way. I had seen maybe one clip of him and kind of went in and out of my mind. And I knew that he was just like some guy in the manosphere, like pickup artist type of like, but I didn't know how big he had become at that point and how much bigger he would become. And so he's on the podcast, and he's very funny when he's engaged with comedians. And the reason why it was so funny, my first impression of him was like this guy's on YouTube, makes videos, and he's fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
Because the hosts of Your Mom's House were like, they were aware that he is a character, or he's playing some sort of character, whether or not Tate is aware of it himself, and how deeply tied into his trauma it is. Like they were having fun with the character of Andrew Tate. And so Tate was like, you know, telling Christina, like, you know, this, like, you have to keep my bitches in line. And then Christina P is like, how, as a bitch, like, how do I stay in line? And Tom's like, yeah, how do I keep my bitch in line? Like, it's his wife.
Yeah.
And they're just like having fun with it. They're both hilarious. And so it wasn't like the other super serious conversations that I would go on to see him have with Piers Morgan and, you know, every other.
You're like, oh, you're serious.
Yeah, exactly. So like they were dancing on the superficiality of Tate's character.
Yeah.
And making it so funny. And so I was like, oh, this guy jokes around, like it doesn't really mean anything. And you know, he must be doing impressions of this on TikTok or whatever. Like he's clearly just like being an asshole for the character's sakes, for fun. And then he goes on to do, you know, more serious style interviews and talking to guys like Piers Morgan, and it's very challenging. There's a lot of tension. It's very Tate's on the defense, which he never really was in the Your Mom's House podcast, because like whatever they say, they just double down on it and be like, maybe you should lock your wife in a cage, like and like all this stuff. So it's just interesting for my own perspective to be molded by seeing it through a comedic lens of Andrew Tate for the first time, and then slowly realize that I do believe that there is an element of what he's doing to just entertain himself. And he knows that he knows he has a sense of humor, and there are aspects of his personality that he's clearly playing into, but he was much more serious about what he was saying than I realized when I saw him on Your Mom's House. I thought I was like, maybe he believes like 4% of this, and then you go on to find out that it's probably closer to like 94% of what he's saying he actually believes. So yeah, that was my introduction to him. And then watching him completely take over social media like a whirlwind, to take over YouTube, take like anything that had videos, he was just popping up in my feed constantly.
Yeah.
And yeah, it made sense to me that a lot of younger men would gravitate towards that, because he fulfilled a lot of the concerns that I had when I was, you know, 14, 15, 16, like even up to my early 20s, where I valued myself as, you know, how many girls can I hook up with this month? I want to get a job in finance, you know, work in banking, make like $200K a year, like work 90 hours a week, like whatever it takes. I'll just like do that. I want to drive the
Maserati.
Yeah, you want to have nice things. You want to like, part of being a man is showing off, and those things are very fun. Not that I have them, but like I've rented. I went down to Miami and I rented a couple supercars, and I'm like driving around a Porsche, and I'm just like, I know, like this is why. Like when you press the pedal, and like your soul vibrates, and I'm like, oh my god, like I want to fucking drive this every day of my life. And it's like, I do think some of those things are important, but I didn't realize how serious he was about the value system that he was joking around with on Your Mom's House compared to what he would go on to become.
I do wonder, going back to that whole mirroring thing, like how we become who we are depending upon or based upon the people around us who are mirroring us and who we're mirroring. I wonder if he at first didn't take himself that seriously, but then when he saw that so many other people were taking him seriously, he started to reflect that and take himself even more seriously. Perhaps that like passes the buck a bit, but I do wonder, like, you know, the impact of celebrity in general can be a curse, can be an incredibly profound curse for people who achieve that level of fame. And it's like, oh, they want me to show up in this way. They're rewarding me with likes and retweets and shares for showing up in this way.
Yeah.
And oh, what's that? My external sense of self, this is the subconscious part, but my external sense of self is in fact looking to be validated.
Yeah.
That can create a wild loop that not only is harmful for the, you know, the naive people who take what Andrew Tate says as gospel, but also for Andrew Tate himself. Like, I see some of his tweets. I was following him for like a month because I was just fascinated. And I was like, I was reading some of his tweets. He's told the story about his father came over to England, and his mother had just gotten him a haircut or something, and the haircut didn't turn out right, and she was like, in his words, fussing over her hair. And then his father comes over, and he like, his father is like triggered by the fact that his mom is fussing over his hair. So his father takes him to a barbershop and basically tells the barbershop to cut his hair off. And he's like, guys don't care about their hair. And in the comments, it's so funny because,
and he's had the same haircut for years. From 5 years old, he's just been bald.
Yeah. And he's like, you look at some of the comments. Some of the comments are like, guys definitely care about their hair.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like exclusively a female thing to care about your hair. Like, in the hip hop community, looks are a thing. Like, it's an aesthetic that is like important to maintain. And it's like, one of the things I tried to point out is like, isn't it interesting that the conclusion that you came to was that like women fuss about these aesthetics, but the person that really fussed about it was your father. Like, the person that was really like energetically activated and like started yelling about it was your father. It's like, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, like your mom was talking to you about it, and your dad took a blade to your head and just made you shave off your identity as a man, your hair.
It's just like, there's like very clearly deep wounds to me that are visible whenever I read almost anything that he writes. And as much as I like, sure, I get a thrill from, you know, psychoanalyzing from my armchair, like what I think is showing up in his life in terms of like his father's legacy and his grandfather's legacy and stuff like that. But I also care about Andrew Tate, and I think that people should care about Andrew Tate and not just, you know, shit on him when they critique him, which is going back to the second principle of the theory of enchantment, right? Criticize to uplift and empower, never to tear down or destroy.
Yeah. He's fascinating because usually the guys who are in the manosphere space where they're just like, this is how you be a man, this is how you talk, this is how you pick up women, this is how you make money, like, they aren't super relatable. Like, they don't really have a sense of humor. Anyone who's self-aware will just see right through it, and they don't take jokes easily. They can't poke fun.
They're very sensitive.
Yeah, very sensitive, and like everyone has certain sensitivities. Like, you know, I have. I think stand-up comedy helps me process my sensitivities better because if I hear a joke I don't like and I'm offended, I'm like, wait, what just made me offended? And then I think about it, and then that kind of clears out. And
I love that.
And Tate has that too. Like, he's a human being, but he seems to have more of a sense of getting through to people and sitting in the pocket conversationally. And like, if someone talks shit to him, he talks shit right back. And so he has the relatability and sense of humor aspect. And also, he was a professional fighter. He was a world champion kickboxer. And so a lot of the guys talk a big game in the manosphere community. But when it comes down to it, if someone throws a punch, they just crumple up or get in their car, and they wouldn't actually be able to defend themselves. And Tate has the confidence of knowing that 99.9% of people on the planet, if he's talking shit, chances are he's going to be able to get out of it. So there's no sort of cowering to a level of, okay, let me meet this person here, because if I offend them too much, like maybe they'll swing at me, or like
Sure.
just that innate fear of getting your ass kicked. If you're a professional fighter, I imagine you don't walk through the world with nearly that same level of fear as the average person. Maybe
which is why I really want to see Andrew Tate have a conversation with Mike Tyson.
yeah.
Like I would pay good money to see that, or to just like be there in the room.
Yeah. To see Mike Tyson talk about some of the ways that he's went through transformations.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like Andrew Tate is a version of a younger Mike Tyson, where he has all the ego. He knows people can kick his ass. He has the money. The world's eyes are upon him. And then you start to, I don't know exactly what Mike Tyson's regimen was for becoming more self-aware. I know he smoked the toad a lot. He talks about that on podcasts.
Yeah.
He spends a lot of time with animals, but like to be able to see Mike Tyson talk to Andrew Tate, and Andrew Tate knows that, yeah, this guy might be 30 years older than me, but he will beat the fuck out of me. Like, we'll beat the fuck out of each other.
Yeah.
At the very least. And there's a chance he will beat the fuck out of me. Like, looking into Mike Tyson's eyes, he's one of the few people on the planet that would be able to strike fear into Andrew Tate if he misspoke, or if he offended Mike Tyson, or at least, like, even if nothing happened, like, at least Tate would experience what other people might experience when they talk to him, or they feel threatened, or they feel offended. So that would be a really interesting conversation, to see Mike Tyson and Andrew Tate. I hope that happens.
I hope that happens soon.
The Hot Boxing podcast with Mike Tyson is incredible, and he has all different people on. So I could see him having a fighter on there, for sure. So I was trying to think of Devil's Advocate.
My favorite advocate
for Tate. Yes, much better than the Angel.
Yeah.